All right, Nejeed, let's dive in. How in the world did you get your start at age 13 in business?
The hustle's real, baby. No question about that. No matter how old you are, the hustle's real, baby. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks so much for having me. Great first question. I'm a tennis player. Well, aspiring. I used to be really good when I was a kid, and age has taken its toll. But tennis is actually the reason I started. This is a long time ago, and I'm not going to say how many years, but it was decades that I was a 13-year-old, obsessed about my serve and my forehand and all these kinds of things. And in those days, for all the listeners who have assumed video cameras existed only on phones, we had big mama video cameras that were mounted on tripods that record stuff. And so right. Honestly, like I wanted to get a video camera to record my serve in tennis. And I have two younger brothers that are 18 months younger than me, and we are all athletes. And so, we went to Dad and said, Dad, we want this video camera. But in those days, it was like 5,000, 4,000. It was like a lot of money, And so my dad was like, he could have afforded it, I'm sure, but he wanted to kind of teach us, or I don't know what he wanted to do. And he said, look, I'm not going to just buy you a friggin' video camera, but I'll buy you a camera. I'll loan you the money. Buy a camera. I'll be your first customer. But if you want to make videos for that, you got to find something to make it work. You got to make, the hustle's real, right? To the point that I made. And so he was our first customer. We started doing promotional videos. We branched out to like business cards, letterheads, menus at restaurants. We did some bus ads. We did a bus ad at one point. So we built like a little I guess they call it these days we call it like a marketing agency, a design agency. And we were kids, but we wanted to work on our serves. And over the course of 5 years or whatever, till I graduated high school, we made tens of thousands of dollars. Like we hustled. So I learned door-to-door sales. I learned rejection. I learned to work with people like printers, like suppliers or partners, all of that. And I was a friggin' kid, man. And I was an ugly kid too. So like, got this ugly kid knocking on your door asking for money, but it was the lesson of a lifetime for sure.
That'll turn you into a seller overnight.
Yes, sir.
You did something that most tech companies never do. You turned EBITDA positive at age 13.
I think it was 14. I think it was after my birthday we were EBITDA positive. So, I got to give credit to time. But yes, absolutely. We can talk about that too later. I'm a big believer in that. So.
Well, no, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it now. So no time like the present, right? So EBITDA positive. Talk to me.
So I'm a corporate lawyer. I guess I'm a recovering corporate lawyer. So, I go to my meetings and everything. But I come from traditional business. My grandfather was in real estate, where he was EBITDA positive essentially right up front, right? Obviously. And so, and he built his business twice because he built it in East Africa. It was, kind of taken from him, and he built it again in England where my family kind of got its start in the Western world. And so that lesson has kind of stuck with me. And so in the early businesses I built, that one and others, we were EBITDA positive right away, right? Like essentially like day 5 or day 45. When I ventured away from corporate law, corporate litigation into tech, we're, at Keela, I can say we're still not EBITDA positive, but we've got a plan to be in the next 18 months. And when I talk to my fellow founders who are at growth stage, it's like, what are you talking about? Why are you doing that? Because to me, I don't want this business, my team, our incredible product, the opportunity we have to be in the hands of somebody else. If we've got to slow down growth, let's slow down friggin' growth. Do I want to? Hell no. But do I know that I want to control my own destiny as much as I possibly can in a world of inflation and instability and capital up and down and bank failures and God know what else is going to happen? If I can not rely on others and continue to grow 50, 60, 70% year over year, I'll take that rather than rolling the dice and growing 200% and maybe doing it, maybe not, maybe getting enough money we need. And so, it comes from my family history, but it's also like a core belief to me as a person. And we're putting our business on that path over the next kind of 18 months.
Well, it's this trade-off that you always have around growth and profitability, around raising money and ownership of the business, right? And it's it's a tough trade-off because you got to make
For
a lot
sure.
of really hard calls. Have you ever fundraised before?
Yeah. So we raise money like, up until now, but not from venture. So we've raised from family offices, angels. I put in a bunch of money, incredible investor group, but for the most part, they've been advisors. We have an independent board, so there's governance, but they've let me kind of build and do what I think is best for the business. And I know much more about the industry than they ever will, right? We sell technology to nonprofits and governments and focus on fundraisers and folks raising money. I've done that work. I've worked in and around nonprofits for decades. So when they're saying this is how you should grow, part of me, it's great to take in, it's great to listen, it's great to process, but they might not know what the hell they're talking about, because what works in oil and gas SaaS might not work in nonprofit and government SaaS, for example. And so, I've taken the capital. We have incredible advisors, but it's given me a degree of independence and critical thinking. And as a lawyer, that's really important to me, where I can actually think about problems, pitch ideas, get feedback. It's not that I think I'm not that smart, right? But it's given me the room to do that instead of having to follow some, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but BS formula bullshit formula that some people think, a group of people on Sand Hill in California think is the right way to grow. And I think I can build a bigger, more powerful, more influential business without taking that kind of capital than I can with it. And then maybe that's hubris, and I'll own that. But and maybe in the future I change my mind. But that's kind of where I stand now, and those are my beliefs.
I love that. We need to throw a little like clapping emoji in here somewhere.
That's funny.
So you've got a rich history in entrepreneurial nature. You've got your own background of getting started at age 13. You have conquered a lot of things over the course of a relatively young existence so far on this earth. And now you're building a pretty awesome company at Keela. So talk to me about what that is and how you got there.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it is, what the market is, and how I got there in that order. So first one is, Keela builds software for nonprofits and specifically for fundraisers. So, all of us have made donations online. All of us have received newsletters from nonprofits. They're such an important part of our society, of our democracy. And, they help so many folks in need, whether it's human rights, the environment, or, your church or whatever it might be. Like, we don't realize just how important nonprofits are to the fabric of the US and Canada. And we serve them. So we serve the people doing the fundraising, and they have shit jobs, to be honest. Like, it's a slog. They're wonderful people. They work their asses off. They don't have great technology. They haven't been given access to like powerful emerging technologies. And so I've spent years in the space, as a fundraiser, as a board member. I was a charity lawyer, and I was like, we got to do better. We got to do better for this vitally important sector. We got to not just have like second class software. We got to build the best software in the world specifically for them, because they deserve it. And it's so important that they do. Right. So that's kind of the journey we started out to do. And we're a donor management tool. If you've made a donation online, through a form, that could be our technology. If you've received a receipt from a nonprofit for a donation, that could be our technology. We've got, I think we're in all 50 states now with customers, and all across Canada and Australia and New Zealand. And so, and we're doing cool stuff too. We're using like predictive analytics and machine learning to help fundraisers predict, should I ask Jim now? Should I ask Jim in 3 months? What's going to be, better from my time and more likely to give a positive result? We're adding things like automation and workflows and really dope stuff, right? That fundraisers really need. And the thing I want to add is nonprofits are giant. They spend like $15+ billion a year on software in the US. They represent, I think it's like 5.6% of the US GDP and 10.9% of the private sector workforce. Like, it's bigger than oil and gas in the US, right? This is not some niche. This is like a friggin' pillar. And so it's fun to be building awesome stuff for that market. Does that make any sense?
It makes tons of sense. So let me just make sure that I don't get it wrong though. So predictive analytics when it comes to giving and workflow, personal intent data on historic data points coupled with metadata, and a booming market that it makes up 5.6% of GDP.
It's like $2 trillion to spend a year, I think, is the number.
Yeah, it's decent. Yeah, no big deal.
So like, there's a TAM somewhere in there.
There's somewhere, yeah, somewhere.
We're also like the system of record, or like that's the core of it, right? All of this stuff, all the predictive analytics, all the receipting, all the forms is built on like the CRM core. So yeah, that's pretty fun. And we get to not and feel good about ourselves when we go to bed. Like, you know, I think we helped our customers raise like $900 million or something stupid lot. Like, it's wild.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's wild.
That's wild. So, man, so many questions. So has the nonprofit sector been as receptive to predictive analytics as you expected?
Yes and no. Such a friggin' lawyer answer, right? Yes and no. So
expected, JD.
Yes, JD exactly. JD, pain in the ass. It should be PIA. It's what it should be. Yes, because they're so excited to get a leg up. They're so excited to make. You know, there's some data that came out about like exhaustion, burnout, alcoholism, stress in the sector. So like these fundraisers go to battle every day. So are they excited at the prospect of, shit, something's going to help me out. Something's going to give me more guidance. Something's going to empower me. It's a tool in my arsenal kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the growth-minded ones and the ones who have enough like emotional bandwidth, given all that crap I just talked about, are fired the heck up. No, because there's also an element of fear, just like in every industry that's being, you know, challenged or disrupted or changed by emerging technology. There's a question of like, what about me? What about my role? And giving is personal. It's not a transaction. It's a relationship. So how do we, fundraisers and Keela, by the way, all of us are thinking, how do we allow folks to adopt and be empowered and helped by the technology without making the thing that makes the sector so important, the people, the community, the relationships, feel transactional, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not a no, it's a no if we do it wrong. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And that's the challenge, but it's also the fun stuff.
So follow-on question there, just in general around the digital landscape. How has the digital landscape changed the way that nonprofits operate?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious example, and it's still crazy how little the donations come online, but like the advent of online giving. Right? Yeah. Like the advent of automated recurring giving, like subscription giving, you know, that's not what we call it in the space, but it's like Netflix for giving, right? So, you know, it started as early as like the mid 2005s, like mid 2000s, like, you know, 2005, 2007, 2010. And in the last 15 years, it's just become essentially table stakes for every organization, right? You need a donation form on your website. That's a giant digital change, right? That's, you know, the majority of correspondence with constituents and donors is online. It's newsletters and it's social media and it's emails. Up 20 years ago, it was mail, right? Now there's still a big mail component, but I'm saying like that digital transformation, that's kind of what I'm going to call the pre part of it. But what's exciting now is like the adoption and the use of data for nonprofits, demographics data, predictive analytics data, behavior data. Like if Jim clicks on the link of a newsletter, read more, that's a signal that there's something there, that he's got interest, and maybe it's worth picking up the phone. When with mail, you couldn't do that without the right technology to say, yo, Jim just clicked on that link, hit him up, right? Like there's something there, and that's part of that transition. And we think the next wave is about helping use software to crunch all those numbers to predict what could or might happen, and then fundraisers to respond accordingly. So it's almost like the three waves of digital transformation, right? Yeah. And so it's transformed it massively, yet only, you know, less than 20% of giving happens online. Wow. In terms of, so you're still having a lot of checks, a lot of cash, a lot of wire transfers, a lot of like tithing bowl at church kind of giving, right? Which is totally okay. So, you know, there's gonna, and I don't know what it is and I don't have the number, but there's gonna be a cap on how much can be truly digital. Now, can things be like, digitally enabled or digitally supported, or, where and bigger gifts. People don't want to make a credit card transaction because they know that the credit card company is taking a couple of percentage points. So they're going to write a check if they're making major gifts are still fundamental to the sector. But can you, enable it, support all of that with technology? Maybe not the actual gift. So and lastly, I'll say, like, giving is pretty much the same as it's been for 100 years. Totally. Like at church or temple or synagogue or mosque or at the community center, like, there was giving. I mean, people ask in relatively the same way. You give to and that's maybe human nature to a degree. Yeah, there's marketing and social media and tactics now, but I mean, at the core of giving is something you can't change. And so there's only so much tech that can solve the problems. There's a lot of tech that can enable.
So what role in the tech enablement piece and in the tech aspect of this do things like QR codes or paying by Bitcoin or things along those lines, what role do those play in the adoption of more of a tech forward?
It's funny that you use those too, because we have both of those things in Keela, by the way. So
I know
you can scan a QR code and pay with Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. What I'll say is they're important to open doors, but not central to survival. So, like, for example, I'll use a really cool example of how some of our customers use QR codes to blend old school and new school fundraising. Okay. So we have customers, like, there's something still about receiving a piece of mail. I don't know what it is. There's something to it, right? Especially like millennials think it's super novel and boomers think it's kind of normal, but there's an audience for that. So we've got customers that are going to do physical mailings, customize them. Some of them are handwritten. And at the bottom of the thing is a QR code where you grab your cell phone, you scan, and you're on a donation form that's tailored to what the message from that letter was. Totally doable. So, like, why is that interesting? It's interesting because it's old school. It's a letter. Somebody may have written it or typed it out or whatever it might be. But it's new school because it's cutting administrative time. It's making the gift instantly. It decreases processing. It means the receipt can be issued instantly, like as soon as the donation's made. So is it central? Yes. But it's still using these sort of older methods that resonate with the donors. Bitcoin is to use that example, is like mostly about opening it up to new potential donors. There's a community of folks that think like crypto is like a way of life going forward, and they want to give, and they want this adoption and the mass market of it. They made a lot of money on it, and they want to deal with capital gains or whatever the benefits are. Technology helps you increase the likelihood they're going to make that gift because it aligns with their values or their hopes or their interests. So again, is it central to do you need it to raise money? No. But are there a ton of ways that it can create abundance for fundraisers and make their lives easier and make the processes better? Yes. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And more. It was a great answer. So what do you think the key is to successful donor management?
Prioritization and humanity. And they're very different, right? One tech is really good at, one tech is relatively useless for. So, fundraisers, no matter how big the organization, are overburdened. We just talked about that a little bit. So, technology can help align, it can help validate instincts. So I like to think of instincts are data driven, but data can inform instincts, but it can't inform the conclusion you make from the instinct, right? And that's really important. So technology can give you visibility into things like Jim clicked on a link, right? And then you use the relationship, the humanity, the community side of that, and your experience as a fundraiser to make a decision. So the tech is it's not a glass ball in that it says what's going to happen, but it is a behavior predictor and a tool. And I think, in most industries, that's actually the role of technology. It's not to replace people. Even Chat GPT and all that kind of crap. You still got to ask the right question. What's the big thing now? Prompt engineering, getting the right question with the right context. That's what a human does. And the tool can do all the hard work of the other stuff that, we don't want to do or we don't have time for. The same thing with predictive analytics. it has, I think we have like 100 million data points. Like there's no human that can crunch that shit no matter what you do. No matter, I'm not that smart, but there are smart people in the world. They can't crunch all that data. Nobody can. So let it do the work, come to like a recommendation, and then you use your humanity, your instinct, your relationships to inform your behavior. So it can transform it, but it doesn't replace it.
So how have nonprofit organizations adapted their strategies to meet the demands of today's donors?
I like to use recurring donors as a really good example because it's amazing for nonprofits, and it meets a lot of folks, especially like Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs, kind of where they are, right? Yeah. So we're the subscription generation. I think at this point, I remember reading a business case about the risk Adobe took when they switched Photoshop from being a CD to a subscription. And everyone told them they were insane. I remember reading the case, and it generated billions of additional revenue, like instantly, and loyalty and all these kinds of things, right? And so we're all used to subscriptions: Netflix, Spotify, Apple Plus, Paramount Plus, God knows. If we have kids, Disney Plus for sure, right? And so there's a comfort level for folks making these recurring donations. And they're great for nonprofits because they mean there's consistent engagement, but not the constant need to always be asking, right? And there's predictable revenue, and there's all these things. And millennials, and especially Gen Zs and millennials, can't afford to make a $2,000 donation on Thursday, but they might be able to give you 50 or $100 a month because it just becomes part of their kind of cadence of what they spend every month. So technology has facilitated all that, to answer your question, right? So you can go, just like you sign up for a subscription on Spotify, do a recurring donation. It's going to take care of charging your card. It's going to not bother you with a receipt every month. It'll just give it to you at the end of the year for your taxes. It'll take care of the mess. And that's how technology can like really be a boon for the sector. As one example, I can give you 100, but that one's the one I really like. And I think it's something like 50. They did a report, a study on millennial giving. It's like 56% of millennials, I think that's the number, are comfortable with recurring donations. It's more than half. People are like they're okay with it in the U.S. So it's wild, right?
I mean, it's the membership economy. Right.
Exactly.
Subscription economy.
I mean, even Uber now with Uber Plus, even though you're not getting anything for it, they want you to pay
definitely
Amazon
not
Prime.
Getting anything on that
right?
one. Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
I want to go back to Keela. And obviously, the origin of this podcast is really all about the dirt of what companies go through in making it to the next level and growing and exiting and things along those lines. So take me back to when Keela was a few million in revenue. What have been the biggest challenges that you've faced in developing your business since then?
It's a trend. Let's go like 1, 2, whatever the threshold point. It doesn't matter. Getting to zero, from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 or whatever it is like a knife fight. You just have to try really friggin' hard
with a dull knife.
It's right. You got exactly. And you just got to survive, and you got to not get hit. And you gotta run through a wall, right? And it's to a degree, it's like brute force and ignorance, right? Like 2 to plus, 2 to 10, 2 to 20. We're not quite at that upper level yet, but it's a chess game. So you've got to take, and that's quite a different. It's a cultural shift in the business. It's so you've got. It's like you gotta fine tune all those hustly things that you did and apply them in a very different way. And it's different, right? You got to be more judicious about how you spend your time, especially if you're working to get to EBITDA positive. You got to be more judicious about how you spend your money. It's not growth at all costs. It's growth in the right way, in the most repeatable, scalable, repeatable way. So that's a mindset shift, right? And then on the product side, you got to think about, what am I doing to lead? And what am I doing to respond to my customers? Because, we have even when we had $1 million in revenue, we had a lot of organizations. We had a lot of customers. We had thousands of people. Even we have tens of thousands of people using our tools every week now. And so it's responding to like what they need versus what they want, really getting into the root of the problem, being careful about what you build, being careful about where you spend. It's kind of a switch you need to do once you start to scale. And that's not a switch that it has, kind of longer tail ramifications. It may mean it's not the same people that are doing it. It maybe means you've been doing something one way that you've got to evolve to doing it a relatively largely different way. And I think if organizations don't think about it differently, and it doesn't have to happen overnight, obviously, but they're going to stagnate. And so that's why you see a lot of folks that hit, like, honestly, I think I read the largest number of startups stall between 1 and 2. Get to 1 that's like a huge, like, rip your shirt off, happy milestone. And then they kind of try to do the same thing to get to 2, and then from 2 to 3, and then 3 to 5 or whatever. But there are some changes, and that's really important. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, some drastic changes, and you bring up a couple of things around culture change, culture transition, moving from early stage to growth stage, right? And one thing you've said to me in the past is when you get comfortable in the early stage, then you have to kind of rebuild and scale it, which makes it sort of feel like a startup again, right?
Definitely.
Like, speaking a little bit to that.
Yeah, so I'll say 2 things. I think it's getting to whatever your goal is and scale. For us, it's scale, right? It's like massive scale. And it's easy to hit 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever it is and like get kind of coasty, get comfortable, right? It's like we've made it. But unless you're printing $1 million a year on $3 million of revenue and EBITDA positivity, you haven't made it, right? There's so much work to be done. And even then, if it's a big market, you have so much to do. And so, the value that I live by so much is like, you've got to always be uncomfortable in your job, in your role. You've got to, every 6 months, you got to question, just because we've been doing it and it's worked, doesn't mean it's the right thing for the next stage or the next 12 months. Right. And it doesn't have to be 6 months, but it shouldn't be more than a year, is my opinion.
Right.
And so, for us, that was super central, and getting comfortable and getting a culture that got to comfortability, got to, you want to stay the hell away from cruise control. And so for me, that's scary because it might mean letting go of some people or changing their job descriptions or whatever it might be that's going to make them uncomfortable. And you feel like, oh man, I feel like I'm back in it again. I'm in high school asking the girl to the dance again, but I've been married for 5 years, right? Like, why do I feel that butterfly, that nervous, that loneliness, that pressure, whatever it might be, especially at the top, especially for the leadership teams? It's scary because you're like, I finally found something that works. But the problem is it worked. That doesn't mean it works. And that nuance is really important. And it's I can tell you, as we've kind of are in it and now moving through it, it's not really moving through it because in 6 months I'm going to have to do it all over again, right? And so but it's also what makes it fun. It's like the thrill of it too, right? It's exciting to like challenge your own assumptions, push yourself to think differently, know that there's always a new frontier and more to do and more to build. And for me, I'm like a very much the builder personality. I love to build. That's what gets me fired up in the morning. So and usually I have a crying kid waking me up too. So, there's that.
Well, I'm about to have one in 6 months, so I'll be in the same boat.
Praying for you.
Thank you. How do you continue to catch yourself though, as you get comfortable? I mean, obviously it's easier said than done to every 3 or 6 months or whatever the cadence is, stop yourself in your tracks and say, is it working? But are there any tricks that you use to make sure that you do that and that you don't lose track of a year or 2 years or 3 years before you realize that, oh my God, it's not working?
It's a great question. I'm going to answer it without really answering it. So what I'm going to say is, find people that exactly fucking lawyers. Find people that you can catch yourself with. So create like I have a mantra that says like, surround yourself, like be the dumbest guy in every room. I married a smarter woman than I, my team is brilliant, so if you surround yourself with those people, they're not going to let you get complacent. And if they do, they're the wrong people. Right. So I don't know if that's like a trick. It's not like, maybe it's setting a reminder in your calendar, like check yourself kind of thing. Like it could be as simple as that. But for me, it's the people. It's like, that's the the agile, iterative culture that we've built, even as we get to scale, right? Or get through to getting to scale. And so for us, it's about making sure that there's cultural alignment especially in the leadership team and the management team, that's the expectation. And you got to kind of want that. And because of that, if one of us is sort of, stretching out on the hammock a little too much, the others can catch. And by the way, that I'm the CEO and I'm my chief of staff, my VP of marketing, my manager of customer success. It doesn't matter to me. They all have a responsibility to catch me just as I do to catch them.
Sure. So just to
by the
repeat
way,
what
it can
you
be
said,
tough on the ego.
Oh my God. Yeah, no kidding.
But it's good. That humility, like that humble pie is so key, man.
So whether it's your wife at home or your team at the business, having the right people to catch you. If for some reason your calendar alert doesn't go off every 3 months and say, "Hey, have you checked yourself?" You've got the right people and the right network around you, Nejeed, to
and
make
your
sure
board
that
and your advisors. It's bigger than just your team, right?
Totally,
but yeah,
totally.
But they have to have the same alignment, and this is where we learned a lot, right? We got to make sure that all the people, as they grow, as the business grows, continue to have. If that's a core culture, and I believe it's a core cultural asset for a business, especially getting to scale, they've got to also make sure that they feel that same mentality and that they're bought into that. Because if they're not, how can they catch you?
Right. That's a great point. So
and that's what I missed, by the way. That's the part I missed. I didn't make sure that everyone in the same way was bought in, that they understood that value in the same way. It wasn't even necessarily about them. It could have been about the communication or how values are such an obtuse thing, right? It's like how to exemplify it, how to call it out for good, how to call it out for not so good. And so, that's on me. I take accountability for the times that we've struggled through that. And I've worked really hard over the last 6 to 12 months to kind of hunker down to make sure that the alignment is there.
So how you've done that now, how was it then? Like how did this evolve over time so that, you're now making the right decisions around these things?
You used a good word, evolve, right? Like I'm not preaching revolution here. I think I'm an executor. I love to do stuff. I love to put my head down, take my pen, get in my spreadsheets and work, right? And sometimes it's easy to think, oh, we wrote the values on the website or they're printed on the wall at the off, right? Like people will buy into them. But, as a CEO, my job is to make sure the troops are all rallied around not only the same OKR from a revenue perspective for this year, but also like what those values mean and how people are living and working by them and and they're probably going to change. The context of them is going to change as the business grows and evolves, as it naturally does. So what I learned in that process is it's kind of like, it's a bit circular because the same thing where you got to re-examine the business, with how marketing is done or sales is done. You also have to think about how you re-examine how your team is digesting and living the cultural stuff. And that's where I was not as vigilant. And that's on me, right?
So you're now beginning to scale your business with a workforce of millennials, right? Mm-hmm. As are a lot of other businesses, not just you. Mm-hmm. Has that been challenging you as a different type of leader?
Millennials have an incredible passion. They have a deep care, and especially for a business like ours where impact is like such a currency for which they get rewarded as beyond just their salary. Like we're so lucky to get people so fired up. I think what's really key for me is making sure that the expectations of the work culture are really well laid out, because the general work culture is different from when I kind of started my career, right? It's just a different, I worked in politics than in corporate law. Like, it's a very different work culture. And the tech work culture, especially during the super, super frothy times, and I'm thinking like 18 to 21 or whatever that was, where, it was not necessarily in alignment of what the gritty kind of high accountability, high stuff that we just talked about, right? At our business. And so It's about communicating up front when people are applying, what the expectations are. It's about attracting a certain kind of people for us, the builder mentality. It's about making sure that there's values alignment, like we just talked about. And if you can do that and kind of check yourself on that, millennials can be phenomenal and are amazing. We've got a ton of inspiring folks. I think if you don't do that, though, it can be dangerous because there's so much noise out there. There are so many, social media and this and that, and, almost like preconceived notions about what working in tech can or should be, that there's a danger to falling out of what we need and continue to need as a business.
Yeah, well said. So how does that, we're going to use that word evolve, you love again, right? How does that evolution in the workforce work as companies are putting millennial leaders in place, are hiring more millennials, right? How does that evolve as a business?
I think it's really about what you're doing to train and teach and empower and educate consistently, because it's an evolution that, you got to keep working on your staff ultimately, right? As much as, at some point, and I think we're getting close to that with the amount of people we've got, my job is to empower the people to empower their people, right? And we're not a big hierarchy, and I did a discovery call last week, right? Like, I'm still in it, but so much of my job is coaching my team, especially as a CEO, right? Coaching them on how to lead their team, coaching them on how to put out challenges. And sometimes I think, damn, it'd just be easier for me to do the damn work, but that's not scalable, right? And so, as these younger leaders grow and evolve and get into management and then eventually leadership, those of us who've got a little more gray in our beards or in our hair, our job is to make sure that we're constantly teaching, communicating. And part of that is culture and values, like we talked about. And part of that is some of the harder stuff. And I think that's how you make sure that there's alignment across the business and you empower these younger folks to do really well for themselves, but also for you, right? For you and for the business.
Yeah. That gray hair must be why you and I tend to wear hats, huh?
Yes, sir. And why my wife makes me shave, because, I have a 3-year-old at home, and he pulls the gray in my beard and says, "Dada, why is there so much gray in your face?" And I just think,
oh, man.
Thanks, kiddo.
Nothing like a slap like that, huh?
Right?
Wow.
7 a.m, he crawls into bed with you and he's like, "Tell me about your gray hair." You're like, welcome to fatherhood, right?
Awesome. So you mentioned a couple things about I might butcher it as I say it, but I would categorize it as kind of hyper prioritization around doing certain things and focus, right? And that focus having a certain level of transparency, a pretty heavy level of transparency as it relates to everything from values to general rules of engagement and working with customers and working with the team. How did that focus and hyper prioritization, how does that take place in the culture?
Great question. So I'm going to tell you how we did it wrong a couple times, and then what we've learned from that, because I think it'll answer your question. So I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, right, we all moved basically overnight from being in a room or a half a floor of an office or whatever it was to sitting at home on Zoom, right? And what happened was there was a lot of siloization of communication. And and I say we, I really mean me, because ultimately, it's my ass that's accountable here, didn't do a good enough job of two things. One, because we were in the office, it was like kind of obvious how things were going, what the tone of the week or the month was, or, what was going on in the business. And it was relatively easy to get a pulse on that for folks. And I think generally speaking, that was the case. When we moved away, everyone was so focused on their team that we lost that. And so, oh, that's just communication. No, it was actually a transparency thing. The transparency existed like kind of by osmosis in the previous iteration of it when we were there. But when we moved away, people are like, well, nobody's telling us anything. And that it was a structural problem, but it led to an actual organizational problem, right? And so what I learned is, how do you most effectively share that transparency? And we do like a weekly huddle, and every team does a weekly update, and we share our revenue progress every week. And, that's a lot of transparency, We also have a company updates channel. So when we make strategic decisions, we make sure we're sharing those and explaining as to why we do them. For example, we screwed up. We tried to spin off a part of a product, and it was really great, but it didn't work. The timing wasn't right, whatever it might be. We owned that. Instead of like just sort of tucking it away and not telling anybody, I don't know if we did it on the company updates channel, or I just did it during the huddle. I don't remember. But I was like, we're putting a pause on this, or we're stopping this, or whatever. And by the fact that we said it, and then I explained why, we need to focus our resources, we need to get to EBITDA, whatever it was, right? And even if the team was disappointed or sad about the decision, there was an alignment as to firstly, what the decision was, because half the time people don't know what's going on at many companies, and two, the why. And that why part, from a transparency standpoint, obviously you don't tell them everything, you don't want them to be stressed about things or unnecessarily worry, but you got to give them enough to understand and motivate, and to give them visibility, because that'll allow them to do their jobs most effectively. And to me, that's really, really important. And I learned it. I gave you a couple of examples of how I learned it the hard way, and how it's kind of changed my behavior.
So now what processes do you guys have in place to encourage better collaboration, better communication, better prioritization?
Yeah, the prioritization one's hard, but the other ones are easier. We do, like I said, the weekly huddle. We have team meetings. We have a company updates channel. We're really transparent about where we are in our goals, what's working, what's not working. We'll never call people out on their BS publicly, but we certainly do a lot of like positive exemplification of culture, or high fives for success. So people see, it's remote for the most part, but it feels like you're there. And I think that's been a big benefit for the business. With regards to prioritization, I was actually talking to, I think it was one of my team members yesterday. It was literally yesterday, when I talked about the fact that I've never had a finished to-do list. And they're like, doesn't that stress you out? I'm like, no, I've learned that it shouldn't stress you out. What you got to make sure is that you're rewriting your to-do list every day or week or whatever it is, where the priorities come to the top, and you just choose when to stop every day or every week, right? There's going to be an unlimited amount of work. So teaching the team that put your 50, 60 hours in, work your tail off, grind hard, but don't do 90 hours, because that's not healthy. And two, it's actually not going to produce your best work. Instead, figure out, do I really need to be doing this week or today or at all? And so our management team, we've been working with them to say, if somebody on your team says, I'm overwhelmed, great. Thank you for bringing it to me. What do you got on your plate? Let's prioritize. So it's like the fires are put out, the opportunities are taken, and the rest, when it'll either turn into a fire or an opportunity, and it'll come back up the top of the list. So building that culture of like never finished building, but don't try to do everything, has been, I think, really important, and continues to be important.
Hyper prioritization.
At least that's my perspective.
No, that's good. It's good. So now that you guys have cleared the $1 billion mark or more, I think you said you did 800.
Almost. I think it was almost $1 billion, but yeah.
Almost $1 billion. All right. So what are the next major hurdles for Keela?
Yeah, great question. So, we serve SMB nonprofits, kind of 0 to 15 million. Okay. But historically, we've done a lot of work with the S side of the S sector, but we've actually built a really dope product, a really powerful, increasing return on investment for fundraising, giving fundraisers back time, and the mid-market is starting to take notice. So now the real opportunity, it's not like we're expanding our market, but it's focusing and saying, hey, look, let's go up market a little. Let's challenge some of the folks that thought, oh, this is our little kind of biting at our ankles company. Now we're like, can look them in the face and say, let's go toe to toe. We can win these deals. We can create the loyalty. We can build a brand around that mid-market. And that's exciting, man. That's fun because it's more scale, and I love scale, and it's more impact because these orgs are bigger and they're doing more work. And add those two together, and it's hard not to fire my team up.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, motivate, engagement, hitting the goals like that is a wild feeling for a team.
Absolutely. And the cool part is, the mid-market nonprofits are not as dire in terms of survival every day, so they can actually take a breath and adopt some of the emerging technology. They can actually get the full value of it. And that's not to say there's anything like the small guys, it's tough. It's in the weeds, right? But as they grow and as they can take pause, we can actually help to move them. So not only are we targeting that mid-market, we're moving our customers from being small nonprofits to mid-market nonprofits. And that's pretty cool too.
All right, Nejeed, let's close this off with our Founder 5. So 5 quick hit questions all around your growth. All right. So first one is number one metric or KPI that you are relentlessly focused on.
I'm going to say net retention. Gross churn, net retention depends on I'm pretty obsessive about that one. Of course, top line growth, but that's the one that I live and breathe by.
So just to make sure everyone knows, net retention rate is?
So you take from a revenue perspective, you take all the revenue you lost to churn and you then subtract or add, depending on how you do the formula, all the upsells, cross-sells, expansion. So we want, net negative churn, which means even though we lost customers and revenue, the upsells and the growth in our existing customers' revenue outpaced the revenue we lost. And we want 105, 110, 115% retention, and that gets me fired up.
Love it. All right. Next one is top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
It's different. Don't run away from the difference. Embrace it. We talked about that a little, but embrace it. Look for the difference. Challenge your own assumptions because it makes all the difference.
That's good. All right. Favorite book or podcast that's helped you to grow as a founder?
Honestly, it's kind of lame, but I'm going to say Shoe Dog, the book on Nike by Phil Knight. It's sort of a fun read and also a great business book. I love that book. What he had to do to pivot Nike in the early days before it was Nike. It was a distributor of another brand's shoe. We don't remember that. How he had to challenge his assumptions, change the business, hope to damn God that things would work. The shoestring he had to balance to survive and lead to what is now, a ubiquitous brand company, culture. It's inspiring. And I loved it. It's fun to read too.
All right. Business rule or piece of advice or lesson you've learned that counters traditional wisdom. Hard
work is more important than intelligence.
Is that the traditional wisdom or the?
So I think the traditional wisdom is that the smartest people do the best stuff. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, that's good.
Maybe I think, hustle, hard work, culture will crush intelligence.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I agree.
I don't know if that's controversial enough, but that's what you're going to get from me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Lastly, what is going to be the title of your autobiography when you accomplished all you set out to achieve?
As a person, I'd love it to be called Renaissance Man, because I want my mind to grow and scale, not just in business, in literature, in music, in sports. I'm obviously an athlete. So if I get this right, I can build billion-dollar businesses, but I can also have intellectual curiosity and in all those other spaces. So it's That's either great. The hustler into Renaissance, something some play on the grit and the hustle and the Renaissance Man.
Hopefully it's not a Renaissance Man edition of Hustler magazine. That wouldn't be probably
That would
same.
be terrible. That would be terrible. That would be terrible.
All right, man. So closing us off, you've given a ton to our listeners here. So always allow people a little bit of time for self-promotion. How can those listening help you out?
I mean, my first thing's kind of going to sound altruistic, but it's also selfish given our business. Like, give, make donations, engage in your communities. It's good for the world. They really need it right now. A lot of folks are so struggling, and it's really important. The second one is, if you work, engage, volunteer with a nonprofit, tell them to holler at us at Keela. We're doing something amazing. We're going to take really great care of them. And thirdly, for all you founders, and this is selfish because I'm in it and I feel it, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Keep going, because it's a lesson that I need to hear from all of you to me, and I'm going to share with you. But like, it's there. You will get through it if you believe hard enough and you work hard enough and you pivot enough.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Nejeed?
LinkedIn for sure. I'm the only Nejeed in the world, I think, with an spelt the way I do, Nejeed. If you search that on LinkedIn, you will find me, and please reach out.
Nejeed, Keela, the Dirt, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thanks, Jim.
And giving your talents for us today. Appreciate it.
Well, hopefully this is not the last conversation we do together.
Yeah, I'm sure it will not be.